Well, it's been a 2-day furore, hasn't it? Is that furore the right word? I've been asked to comment many times on a woman breastfeeding another person's child and a picture that was taken of it. It never ceases to amaze me that as a society, a breastfeeding mother can create so much hostility and anger and the expression of divergent views, even when, if she's feeding her own child in public. The chapter in the book that talks about breastfeeding makes this point repeatedly. They're her breasts. They don't belong to anybody else. No one else has a right over them in any way, shape or form. They are her breasts. And feeding is what they're for. We're mammals, right? Mammals are a class of animal who are distinguished by, among other things, feeding their own children, either with mammary glands or teats. It's written into our evolutionary genetic coding to feed our children. It's a survival urge to feed our children. The formula feeding experiment is barely 50 years old. Long-term studies haven't been done because we haven't been doing it long enough. Of course, there are studies that have looked at formula feeding, and I'm not discounting those. But, as a society, we've been saturated with the sexualization of breasts. We don't bat an eyelid. Our children grow up in a society where you can see on a hoarding a woman's breasts barely covered by a wonder bra, and we don't bat an eyelid. But a woman chooses to breastfeed in public, and somehow it's wrong. Big business, corporations, formula feeding companies have done a job on us, and they carry on doing a job on us, manipulating data, manipulating the airwaves, and it's an unfair fight. Because those of you that work inside the breastfeeding community, those of you that support breastfeeding mothers, have the odds stacked up against you. And situations like this, where someone has put that photo online, I guess are kind of necessary in as much as it does air the debate. We are talking about breastfeeding and wet nursing, which of course we have a long tradition of as mammals. It would have been necessary for survival, for those stronger women, who were, when I say stronger women, I mean the women that had the capacity to breastfeed other women's children whose milk supply wasn't available because of the lack of dietary input and stuff like that. So, breastfeeding is part of our mammalian history. In terms of wet nursing, so is that. In terms of the picture, my opinion is, so long as all the necessary safeguarding questions are answered around the child's mother being involved in the process and the decision, when all of those things are settled, it has nothing to do with anyone what a woman chooses to do with her breasts, with her milk supply. I remember reading The Grapes of Wrath, and if you haven't read it, it's a great book. It's not an up-tempo book, that's for sure. But at the end of that book, it finishes off with a family who are in this kind of railway siding, and a woman has just miscarried. And on the floor is her dying grandfather. And the last section of the book has him crawling over towards the lactating woman and beginning to suckle at her breast. So offensive, in fact, that the film with Gregory Peck in cut it out. I think we need to be having discussions about breastfeeding. I think we need to be openly airing strong opinions and being willing to be entreated and to understand. Breastfeeding longevity needs to increase. I'm convinced that part of that is an educational process, educating the partners of women that breastfeed. And I think that's one of the planks, or one of the ways forward in changing our culture. I'm saddened by the furore. I'm also encouraged that we're having these kind of debates, discussions. That's me, waffly, ranty, but it's me.